Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my podcast. Today's podcast is a very special one for reasons that we'll go into the podcast. The title of this podcast is Count Yourself Blessed. And as usual, I'll start this podcast off with a quote. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. And that's a quote by Steve Jobs. The reason that this podcast is so special to me, or is special in general, is because it's kind of a tribute, my little tribute to a close friend that I had that passed away on Monday unexpectedly. It just goes to show you how quick, life can be here and then be gone. We're just gonna, go off the cuff. I kind of created an outline like I do for most podcasts, but this podcast will probably be shorter than the rest. He was my fraternity brother, and honestly, I don't feel like I, knew him for long enough. I wish, I would have met him sooner in life, met him earlier in life. He was a great individual. He was different. He was definitely different, but I mean, he was an example. He was everything that he had a lot of characteristics that I feel were notable, that other people should desire to have about themselves, and even characteristics that I want to polish that I have, but I can make them more on the forefront of my character, or I could practice them a lot more. He was a successful entrepreneur. He was a father. He made a lasting effect on both of the fraternities that he was in, and he was a very well-known member of the community. The passing of someone always brings us to a place of reflection of the impermanence of our existence. Like every time somebody passes, we always think back to ourselves about how our time on this earth is temporary, and we never know when our last moment is, or even if the next moment is promised, because as we go through life, anything could happen, and tomorrow's definitely not promised. Today could be our last day on this earth. We don't know, but we can't thrive on that. We have to continue to exist, continue to try to leave this world better than we received it, in whatever way we perceive that it's our mission or our goal to do so. Dwelling on the end of our life is not a bad thing in and of itself. Everything in the universe, everything in the world goes through a cycle. Creation, existence, and then passing away from this form to another. Matter is not created nor destroyed. It just passes from one form to another. So it's not a death, so to speak. It's just passing from one form to another. Like water goes from a gas to a liquid to a solid, and then it goes back to from a solid to a liquid to a gas. So it's constantly in flux from what state it's in, but it never truly stops existing. There's no death of it. It just goes from one phase or one existence to another. And I feel personally that we should look at the passing of someone in the same form and fashion. They're not truly dead, as in ceasing to exist from all time and space, but they're just not with us in this reality anymore. Then they don't exist on this plane anymore, but they still exist. And I think the best way to keep them alive is to remember the lessons that they taught you, and to stand on their shoulders, so that you can maybe go a little bit further in life, and maybe you could do more with the time that you have on this earth. Every day is a chance to make a lasting impression. No choice or decision is too small or doesn't matter. Everything that you do matters. Every step that you take matters. Every step that you don't take decides to matter. Every day you decide to fight a little harder, fight a little longer, or any day that you choose, like this is an off day, or that I don't feel like fighting today, that all of that stuff matters. It's it's cumulative, meaning that it's not you learn, then you get up to a test, and once you pass that test, you no longer have to retain that information. It keeps going. It keeps going. So you learn a test, you learn information, you take the test, then that test or all of that information is going to carry to the next level. And then you're going to have to apply that information from that experience in any which way that you feel is applicable in order to achieve some type of success in some way, somehow. And Fritz taught me a lot of different lessons. He taught me a lot of lessons that from sitting down and having conversations to just watching his character and knowing who he was. And I feel that a lot of people that were around him would say the same thing. It would have been very hard to be around him and not have learned a lesson. He was just one of those personalities, one of those type of people that, if you were just around there for any amount of time, that you benefited from the experience, from being able to be in his presence and to thrive from his life experience and his experience in the fraternity. And he was just a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate for the limited time that I was able to know him. But here's some of the examples that I picked up personally from my friend. If you ask, his brother, his son, his other fraternity members, they might give you a different things that they learned from him. But I feel that, everybody that knew him would agree with these 10 things that I've laid out. I mean, anybody could add a million different other things, but I feel like these 10 things right here would definitely speak to his personality, and anybody who knew him would be able to identify with him. So number one is be the example. He was always the example. He was the president of our line, and as president, he was outspoken. He was unapologetic. He was decisive. He made decisions. He was to the point. He was everything a leader should be, I feel. And he set the example. He knew his knowledge. He led the line in a way that was admirable. And through his leadership and the combined effort of my other line members, the CTs, we were able to successfully get through our process. Through all the bumps and the difficulties we were still able to get through our process in one piece. So I feel in part it was to him being the example. So number two, I think a lot of people will identify with this. This is the number one characteristic of him I think that people will identify with. It's be unapologetically you. He was unapologetically him. Like, if it hurt your feelings, if you didn't agree with it, if you were bothered by what he said, it didn't matter. He was unapologetically him. And when it came to him, you had two choices. Either you were cool with it and you would move on and break bread and do whatever, or you just couldn't stand it and you didn't want to be around him, or you wasn't a part of his circle. That's just the way it was. He was unapologetically him. And I feel there's a lot to be said for that, because there's a lot of people that we're going to tote around in life that we don't necessarily need. So if we're unapologetically ourselves, then authentically ourselves, we'll attract and surround ourselves with the people that we need to be with, because we don't need to have a lot of friends. I don't believe in having, a ton of friends. I have a few close friends that I can depend on and that I can count on. And that's good enough for me. If you feel like you need a lot of friends, or if you're like a social butterfly, then that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, in my existence and how I thrive and maneuver through life, I don't feel like I just need to be surrounded by a whole bunch of people. I'm surrounded by good quality individuals that I know I could count on, in the good times and the bad, and that's good enough for me. And we're unapologetically ourselves. If we say something that's offensive to this person, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but it is what it is. Like, this is my truth and I stand by it. I'm unapologetically me. The next one is be a brother's keeper. He was always his brother's keeper, whether it was his blood family, his fraternal family through the organizations he was in, friends that he had associated with and networked with and picked up over time. He was always his brother's keeper. And this goes into the next point, practice generosity. Like, anytime we would go out, to a restaurant to eat, and a social event or whatever it was, he'd always make sure everybody was taken care of. Nobody would hang out with him or be in his circle and go without. And if somebody was down and out or down bad or whatever, he would try to do, his part to ensure that they would have, or that they didn't go without. It was always a good time when you were around him. It was always a good time. Everybody was enjoying themselves. Nobody was really worried about anything. We were always, living our best lives for that moment in time. If just laughing and joking and enjoying the fellowship that we had amongst each other. And we created a lot of good memories, a lot of good times. It was really fun. The next lesson is there was always time to make a new friend. He was always making new friends. Nobody was a stranger. If you had something in common with him, something he could relate to, a business opportunity, he could help you out somehow, some way. He was always networking, and he taught me that I need to be networking, that, I always need to be putting my name out there, introducing myself to people, getting people's numbers, making connections, because you never know how you could help them, how they could help you. He was always teaching me to network, and that's something that I don't do a lot of, that I could do better of. I network on some level, but I definitely need to increase networking. That's one of the things that I can improve upon, and that's a lesson that he really harped on and really tried to, like, ingrain in my skull was the power of networking, and not only for business opportunities, but for lifelong friendships, because I've gained a lot of good friends from just being around Fritz and networking with these individuals. Live life, because tomorrow isn't promised. He lived life. He did live life. He was always living life, whether it was in the organization, whether it was, out fellowshipping with the guys, over in his home country, contributing to their economy and helping out with the development of that country. He was always living life. He was back and forth, always traveling. If, like, when you called him, you never knew where he was. He might be in Florida, he might be in this country, he might be over here, he might be over there. Like, you never knew where he was. He was always on the move. He was always living life. He didn't stay one place. He wasn't a homebody. He was about getting after it, always. But even though he was always about getting after it, even though he moved from place to place and was always, here, there, and everywhere, he always placed a priority on family. That's the next lesson I got from him. He always placed a priority on family. His family was always first. He always put his blood family first, and then the organizations came next. And he made sure that, again, everybody was provided for. He didn't leave anybody without. He made sure everybody was good. Even if he couldn't contribute to them, like, monetarily or whatever, he would make sure, your mental was good, you were sitting in a good place spiritually, whatever the case was. He always put family first, and I admire him for that. That's something that I try to do in my life, is I always try to put my family first. The next lesson is live your truth. He lived his truth. There were fundamentals that he believed in. There were aspects of life that he felt were, like, needs, not just wants. There were truths that he had created based on his existence and experience in life, and he lived those truths. No matter who he was got in front of, no matter who questioned him, or no matter what situation he was in, he was unapologetically himself. He always lived his truth, and I admire him for that, for having the confidence and the courage to be yourself in every situation. Number nine, again, a lot of people who knew Fritz would speak about this, and be able to, associate this with him as a character trait of him. But he always spoke his mind. He always spoke his mind, even if he was outspoken. He spoke his mind. You knew what he thought. You didn't have to guess about what he was thinking, because he would tell you, the way it was. And again, he was unapologetic about it. This is the facts as I see things. You can either like it or not like it. And that's another thing that I admired about him, because I've kind of waned away from that, because the people in my life have said, I've been too abrasive, or I need to, back a little bit down from the way that, I give my delivery, because I used to be very abrasive. I used to be blunt and just like to the point. And I've kind of backed away from that, but I feel like I need to go back to that. And he never strayed away from that. As long as I knew him, he always spoke his mind. The first night that we met, he was speaking his mind. It was crazy. Like, I didn't even know him. He didn't know me. We basically put in our applications. Our organization told us to be at a certain place at a certain time, told us what to bring. We didn't know each other. So the five of us just met, and it was just like five random people meeting for the first time. And the way we met was a hilarious story. My CTs, my cable toes are crazy, but it really is. It really was a unique bond that we forged. I'm glad that I met all of my cable toes, my CTs. I'm really thankful for having known all of them, and for the experiences that we went through while online. And number 10 is stay committed. He always stayed committed to his goals, and in creating. He had one main goal, but then he was always creating sub goals within those goals, and he always stayed committed to those goals. And just because he accomplished one goal didn't mean he was finished. He went out and created new goals, and was always looking for an opportunity to get ahead, and for an opportunity to, further his organization, put his family in a better position, and put himself in a better position. He was always looking for a way to do better. He never settled for just good enough. He always tried to aim for great. And he did that in every aspect of his life, in his education, and both of his organizations, in his business and his community. He always thrived to be the best that he could possibly be. And, these are just 10 lessons that I learned from him. But I'm sure that if you get any amount of people, you could be able to get 100 more lessons that they've learned from Fritz, especially in different stages of his life. I only knew him in this stage of his life, when he was an entrepreneur, when he had experienced success in his business and stuff like that. But I'm sure that there were a lot of other lessons you could learn. And I learned a lot of other lessons from the stories he told me when he was coming up, and he was trying to make his way, and he was fighting to get to the top, and he was persistent and vigilant in his beliefs and ideals, and how he had, one suit, and he was still coming to work just washing that suit every day, and the struggles he faced. And I told him all the time, like, man, you should write a book, because somebody out there can benefit from your story. And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna get around to it. But it is what it is. But this is my little shout out to him. This is my, way of showing my appreciation to him. The next couple of days are going to be filled with ceremonies and paying my last respects to my fallen brother. But, at the end of the day, I'm really thankful for the time that I had with him. I'm thankful for the experience that we had within the organization, the information that he passed on to me, and the friendship, and just the level of knowledge that he brought into my life. It's just another addition to my book of life, is another chapter. But I'm thankful for everything that he brought into my life. You know, he was a really good individual, and I'm really gonna miss him.